It's the state of the dungeon! It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hail and well met. I once more in Korbrecht Cinderflume. Once more back from the sea of moving ice to my little antechamber in the guild hall. Here to report on the goings-on of the final conflict that we had with the dragon Arauthato. We were there in his lair. Well, not exactly starting in his lair, mind ye. We were actually in the chambers of Makath, the seer sage from the Arcane Brotherhood, who we had come to rescue. We had talked with Makath, and truly all we needed to do to complete our mission was to cast a teleportation circle, which I was prepared to do, and we could have returned to Waterdeep without having to confront the dragon. But Makath was nervous about such an approach. She wanted the dragon driven off or killed so that we could leave, and she would not need to fear the retribution of the dragon. I thought it rather silly, considering that all she needs to do is to avoid the sea of moving ice and she'd never be bothered by the dragon again. But she was insistent. Also, we were driven by a sense of obligation, might be a bit too strong, but we wanted to do good for the imprisoned people who were living on this iceberg, to try to free them from the tyranny of Arauthato. My hope was that we could drive the dragon off, do significant damage to it so that it would leave, and we would not have to face its wrath o'er and o'er again. White dragons can be kinda nasty that way. So we went down into its lair by going through its library. I have to admit, the dragon has a most impressive library, and knowing its want, it probably has several others scattered throughout its territory in the Sea of Moving Ice. But this would work as a start for us. Along the way, Makath had come with us, and she pointed out several scrolls, most kindly, that I could use in our battle against the great dragon, which proved profitable, certainly. I did not turn down the kind offer, that is for certain. So, after that, there was a great hole leading down into the depths. Makath had never been in there, but she knew it connected to the lair. And, it being a drop of about 60 feet, and knowing it would be of little use to me otherwise, I took out the Staff of Frost, and I created a wall of ice to create an ice ramp down the hole into the area below. Saved us from having to climb and risk falling and taking damage. So we did so, descending down into its lair. And there we found ourselves on an ice shelf, which gave a terrace effect over a very large cavern that the dragon used as its primary lair. Frankly, I was a bit surprised to find the dragon right there below its library, reading a book bathed in torchlight through the room. I actually suspected that it was some sort of trap. We'd been warned that the dragon was fond of using magics. And unless the dragon was greatly distracted, it might already have an idea that we were there. So I suspected at first that the image of the dragon sitting and reading was a ruse. The rest of my group were not so ambitious to test the dragon initially, but if we had descended down the terrace and walked out onto the lair itself, we would have been exposed. Not a great deal of cover or anything like that, and since the dragon could fly and there was a height of about 60 feet, it could have proven somewhat difficult to fight the dragon with such space around us. So instead, we kind of gathered together on the edge of the ice shelf, and I called out to the dragon that we were looking for help. The dragon turned its head, observed us, and mentioned that it was rare that its feast had actually come to announce itself before the dragon. I decided that I was not going to play its game, instead telling it that no, we were but lost adventurers and could use a spot of help to get out of its lair. Well, it wasn't having any of that, so it asked what our purpose was, and I informed it that we were there to get Macath out, that her family had missed her and had paid us to retrieve her, and that if we could have her back, certainly the dragon could negotiate for her services further, and that way she would be able to learn all the newest ciphers and things, and, well, the dragon wasn't having any of that, I can tell you that. It saw through to the fact that, well, we had other ideas, probably smelling the magic about us, and insisting that none of us were going to leave with all of the magic that we'd accumulated. Well, you can understand that was kind of a no-go further for the conversation. The dragon then started to use its ability over its environment to sheathe us in frozen mist, to create a wall that blocked me off from the rest of the dragon as I stood up on the terrace and the others had moved down into the bowl below. Only a 20-foot drop, nothing too serious. The dragon crept forward before darting forth and hitting most of the party with its breath weapon. However, as most dragons should understand when adventurers show up in their lair, it didn't have nearly the effect the dragon was hoping for. For instance, Glint was wearing the breastplate from the dragon cult that reduced damage in half of what he would normally take, which he was well protected, and also has an immense amount of resilience and fortitude anyway. I was out of range, so I did not get hit, but all the same, everyone else did, but everyone else was protected. Nobody was greatly injured by the blast. I had always assumed from the stories that I had heard of Arauthato that it was bigger, older, but even at, several hundred years of age, it had stirred up quite a bit of infamy. There were deceased adventurers dotted through its lair, frozen in blocks of ice. This proved ideal for us, for we had some cover against its breath weapon in the end, but we immediately began to try to execute our fighting abilities. The problem is, with several of our numbers, their fighting abilities aren't that diverse. The dragon flew, for instance, noting that several of our members had large weapons in their hand, and very few ranged weapons. I did manage to dispel the thought that we had no ranged offense when I hit it in the nose with a fireball. It magically seemed to veer out of the way, only getting somewhat scorched from what was an underwhelming fireball to begin with, but it did start a trend. The dragon knew I was a caster now, and he made sure that when he had a chance he would throw up a wall of ice before me so that I'd have a harder time hitting it. It turns out it doesn't like fireballs very much. Not too surprising. And then it also turned around after Kythian cast a curative spell, realizing he was our cleric, dove down and snatched him up. The whole time, Belphegor was waiting with his sword, and Lydia was waiting with her sword, and Glint was throwing hammers as is his wont. He got to try out his new thunder hammer, and it's pretty impressive, I must say. But when he snatched up Kythian, we suddenly couldn't use the fireballs and such as much. So instead I consoled myself with trying to cast Earthbind on the dragon. I'm pretty savvy as a spellcaster, but I knew the dragon was strong, so at best I had even odds of snaring the dragon and bringing it down to earth, so that our heroes who concentrate in melee could get a few swings in. The dragon resisted again and again and again as I cast the spell. Somewhat disappointing. However, at least one of those times, he did everything he could to dodge the effect, again using up some portion of his essence to do so. And he paid for snatching up Kytheon when Kytheon cast his tried and true Spirit Guardian, which inflicted some damage upon the dragon, but also slowed it down, a status that the dragon did not like very much. So it went straight up for the ceiling and dropped Kytheon. I should also say that his targeting of Kytheon seemed to make some sense. The dragon's first actual movement was to snuff out the torches and put his lair in darkness. Now, of course, being a dwarf, darkness is no stranger to me, and I could see the dragon when he was close enough, but his vision and his sensibilities were far in excess of my own, or Glint's, or Belphegor. So the dragon had a certain amount of advantage until Kytheon cast his daylight spell upon his own armor. Now he had plenty of light, and the dragon prioritized terminating him. Well, the problem with that, again, all he could do is drop him from a height. So while Kytheon was picking himself up, more attacks were raining in on the dragon, and eventually he decided that he had had enough. He got up to the ceiling and cast a spell that we knew he had access to and that we were most afeard of. He cast his Greater Invisibility spell. Now, sadly, the spell Counterspell is a relatively moderately ranged spell. I can only hit out a target out to 60 feet, and the dragon was further than that. Even though I had been ready for the spell, the dragon was just too far out of my range. So there was naught that I could do at the moment. Knowing that the dragon would not hesitate to take advantage of his advantage of being invisible, the others in my group decided that they were going to get creative. Glint, with his superior vision, I must say, or should I say, his superior ears, isolated where he thought the dragon was. So he threw up his hammers in a pattern. One close, one medium distance away, and another one trying to hedge in, to find out where the hammer would bounce off from. At this point, doing damage wasn't even that significant of a difference. Just finding out where the dragon was what was needed. In truth, he didn't harm the dragon, but he pointed out exactly where the dragon was to me, which was all I needed to cast a spell magic and ruin the dragon's ability to be invisible. Oh, he didn't like that very much, I might tell you that. So the dragon, after taking a bit of a beating from range, we really didn't do a great deal of damage to it, all things considered, flew off. Just went off into its darkness. So we pulled back a bit to start healing and gathering ourselves together. We thought it possible, or at least I did, that the dragon would see reason and decide that we were a little too tough for it to fight. I had not been hit except by its freezing mist a little bit, and the rest of our group was actually in pretty good spirits. Then the dragon popped its head out of the darkness again and moved toward us. Well, we were aware that the dragon was a tricksy thing, so Belphegor, who up to this point had just waved his sword around in futility since the dragon wasn't cooperating, realized he had some hand axes, picked up one and threw it at the dragon. It went right through. 'Twas an illusion, designed to try to draw us all up to the dragon so that it could get us all in one large attack, maybe another breath weapon. But in the end, when the dragon realized that we knew it was an illusion, as we called it out right away, the dragon came out again for another charge. Apparently, he decided that he wanted to get another poke at us to see if he could do some grievous harm. Well, it turns out that, unfortunately, Kytheon, when he cast his Spirit Guardian spell, which he lost in the impact from Fallen, lost track of the spell that was protecting poor Lydia. So when it breathed one more time upon our group, she wasn't as well protected. but she weathered the blast, as did the rest of our number, and the dragon quickly learned to regret that decision. Turns out that apparently Cathion was tired of this dragon. He had hit it with a flame strike, impressive enough, certainly, which the dragon didn't like very much, but it liked even less when he cast the spell Slow upon it. Oh, the dragon was not pleased with that. Nor did it really matter all that much, honestly. By this time I had let myself down the rise and was walking toward the dragon now that I hadn't as much to fear of his breath weapon. But Glint turned around and heroically flung a volley, as many as I'd ever seen him throw, with incredible accuracy and precision. He ruined that dragon fairly well, opening up grievous wounds with his hammers all over the body of the dragon. He played it like a cheap drum. The dragon roared in anger. Its rage was fearsome to behold, but it knew fear. It feared us, and would have fled if it could. But I realized I could not allow that to happen. We had the dragon on the ropes, and it was time to end it. When I was able to move, I had thought I would use a fireball to end it. It seemed thematically appropriate as a way to end a dragon that lived off of cold. But I realized that there was still a chance, mind you, that if I used my abilities to create a fire, it might not be enough if I was unlucky enough to throw a poor fireball, and the dragon somehow evaded it. So no, to make sure that the deed was done proper, I pulled out one of the valuable scrolls that I had had. It was a scroll of chain lightning. And thanking the dragon, as I am polite, and all of the aggression was started by the dragon, I thanked the dragon for the gift of the scroll out of his library and demonstrated its use upon him, fairly frying that dragon right there. Yes, I can tell you, honestly and truly, Arauthato is no more. His reign of terror over the sea of moving ice and the environs around the Sword Coast are at an end. The dragon dropped dead from my spell, even as the scroll disintegrated in my hand. The chamber was hushed for a moment. Nothing else came in after us. The dragon had no other defenders, trusting to its own reputation for ferocity to guard it. For all that I had heard that this dragon was clever, I was underwhelmed. But I was prepared for a spell-casting dragon, thinking that if it cast spells I could deflect those, and perhaps it might be actually easier to fight than a dragon that relied upon its savagery and instinct. Well, it was a bit of a mixed bag. Staying at range certainly kept it safe from the likes of Lydia and Balthagor for most of their offense, although both of them did open up wounds upon the dragon in the end, or revealed its illusion for the trickery that it was. And certainly Glint did a great deal of damage, and we couldn't have done a great deal without the light provided by Cathion and, of course, his healing. But I am at least honored that I was able to deplete the dragon's defenses and finally finish the dragon off. I think we were a conundrum he was not prepared to understand, despite the fact he had a reputation for taking on things more powerful than he would seem to have been himself, with his magics and his cunning. So we celebrated its death. Half of our group immediately started harvesting. We got a great deal of residuum out of its essence and organs. A bit of a grisly work, but one that Balthagor and Glint were certainly up to. And of course Cathion was going about, noting that the dragon's hoard was all frozen in ice around its lair. When the dragon would lie on its treasure, it would lie on the ice that surrounded its treasure, but it seemed to work for the White. He noticed the particular items that we valued that were in the ice and prioritized their removal. Later on, my fire spells, such as my bonfire and my fingers of fire that I now can have mastered, would make getting the rest of the treasure out fairly simple. But I went back to talk to Macath. I told her, "We have freed you. The dragon is no more. Now we must make some move to pack up what we are taking with us, plunder everything that is of any value here, and return." She was in agreement, of course. So she told us that the dragon's seneskull, an ice toad, was of value with his knowledge and the information he could give us, not only of the dragon's wares and the processes that he understood, but this particular ice toad was of a mind that I can respect. He knows the ancient tongue of the primordials, as well as other bits of lore that I wish to also know. So I gave him an offer, and he accepted working for the Grand Order. And I don't think it would be particularly difficult to get the rest of the guild on my side with understanding the usefulness of this particular ice toad. And even if not, I have no problems befriending other races. So, if it is intelligent, and it is not treacherous, I can give him a good home. Now, Macath seemed to be fairly equitable. She isolated out the most useful spellbooks and books of lore, which immediately we began packing up. It turns out that she had a good mind for doing all of this. Of course, Glint could not be dissuaded from immediately haranguing her about the haft of the dragon hammer which she had claimed. She was reluctant to turn it over, but the price had been paid. The dragon was dead and she was free. So eventually, with some regard of good grace, especially considering the utter lack of any kind of courtesy or diplomacy that exists within Glint, she turned over the rod of adamantite that is the haft of the hammer. Not so useful without the head of it, of course, and we are aware the head is in the possession of a gold dragon, which I am sure that Glint will make an utter ass of himself until he gets, so... But I do doubt that he will get it. He is as stubborn as any dwarf, and with that kind of stubbornness, results eventually are accomplished. So, we gathered up everything that was of use, plundered the dragon's hoard, which fetched us an amount of coin, certainly. It also fetched us some very nice magical items, some armor, an Ioun stone, one of the nicer magical items that just about anyone can use. We found in a Freety bottle, a very powerful Freety bottle, which Glint is now carrying around, which worries me a certain amount. We know that the beast inside can grant wishes. But what I found that the others relinquished to me without any discussion was a tome of clear thought that the dragon had used himself. When I devour this tome, not literally, but reading it, I will expand my mind and grow even more intelligent. The currency of a wizard, after all, is the quality of our mind. I am looking forward to this read. I'm going to go without sleep because we have a timetable ahead of us, but I will have this mastered. And also, with these books, their magic replenishes and can be used again in a century. I plan on using this book a few times. I'll be the most intelligent dwarven wizard ever, since the last time another dwarven wizard had access to one of these books, quite honestly. But it'll fuel my magic and make me more powerful? I can't say no to that, now can I? So, I am prepared as I can be so that we can cast the spell and return home. Because Macath did not perhaps know the correct magical pattern for the guild order teleportation circle, I handled the process and teleported us all back with all of our ill-gotten gains, loot, books and lore, and so on and so forth. I had enjoined upon Macath that I wished to read any of the books that weren't the express property of the Arcane Brotherhood, as I do not wish to have any fights with the Arcane Brotherhood trying to learn their secrets, unless of course they wish to give them to me at some point. Who knows what can happen? But we returned with the great news that we had succeeded. Arauthato is dead, Macath has been freed, the Grand Order has triumphed, and our legend will be etched upon the Sword Coast for the liberation that we have done in the Sea of Moving Ice. One thing that we did do before we left, though, is we did have a fairly good time with the nomadic people that Arauthato had penned in on his island. They were very glad to be liberated. They had one great feast. I had a pleasant time, after all. I learned some lore from the shaman who served the people of that tribe. She was very giving. And we ate well and drank well. But when we returned to the guild, well, we were seen as conquering heroes once more. Bryn was happy to see us. I don't think she really doubted that we would return, but it's always dangerous going up against an angry dragon. And, of course, we had the dubious pleasure of trying to keep everyone together instead of scattering out and doing what everybody wished to do, with a pocket full of coin and all of the different things that we wished. In the end, it was pointless. Everybody scattered to the winds. I went to go and talk to Laeral Silverhand, and, well, quite honestly, I had a nice talk with her. She's a brilliant mind and a pleasant companion to talk to. And we described the battle and explained that I wished to have Macath properly interviewed quicker than the Council of Lords would be willing to draw up. She said that it was inevitable that the council would form again, but it would take 2 days to do. 2 days seems like an eternity when the Cult of the Dragon's agents are here and there. They might attempt to assassinate her or some such. So I talked to her and said we should have her discuss things earlier and then later be brought in as an expert witness. And Mistress Silverhand was appreciative of that, and as the Open Lord of Waterdeep, she can be as persuasive as she needs to be. We are well served with her being on the same side, and now some of my concerns have been allayed. Now the rest of the group, of course, had their own needs and desires that they went out. Basically a large shopping trip. Glint asked me to assist him with creation of some magical items. I instructed him that we didn't have the time, we didn't know what kind of timetable we were looking at, and I have things of my own that I'd like to do. I've got ale to craft, I've got potions to use my alchemist skill on. So, unfortunately, I cannot help Glint to live out his idea of mongering every magical item he can imagine. But I'm sure he'll be able to do just fine with the new wealth that he's got in his pockets. As far as the others, well, I'm desperately hoping that this last battle has taught everybody a lesson about being able to fight at different ranges and effectiveness. So, between Lydia and Belthegor, and perhaps even Glint, perhaps the understanding that they need to diversify their weapon selection might be a lesson hard learned. But we shall see what we shall see. We get to live as conquering heroes for a time, known as Dragon Slayers. I prefer the title The Bane of Arauthato. I think it rolls nicely off the tongue. Korbrecht in the Flume, Bane of Arauthato. Quite good. And therefore, we can rest for a few days until the council meeting. I'm going to be working on resupplying. I think I need to upgrade some of my own garb. But not because the dragon tested me overmuch, our strategy was more than the dragon could handle, but because I knew that coming up we have fiercer foes to deal with. Now that we have captured the white dragon speaker and ended the black dragon speaker, we have heard that the green has reared its ugly head, and that now we know where it is, and that it has an ally in a green dragon, one that is familiar to our group. That same dragon that our group rousted out as a young dragon that they've advanced in age. This is something that needs to be ended, and I will be proud to take a part in it. So moving forward, glory to the Grand Order and success to her always, as we go forward, boldly, proudly, and with honour. I am Korbrecht Cinderflume, Bane of Arauthato, and I will speak with you next time I have something to report. Farewell!